So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the lighthouse itself, right? And one of the things that's very interesting is how the biologist describes the lighthouse. She gives it a sort of uncanny essence because, again, um, like she says on page 98, up close, I'm going to say, instead of it, I'm going to say the lighthouse gave the strong appearance of having been converted into a fortress, a fact conveniently left out of our training. So a fortress is like a wall, right? And we're all familiar with walls, right, in this class. It's a physical border, almost like, and is meant to keep people out. And whoever was here had taken the time to rappel down the sides of the lighthouse and attach jagged shards of glass so that people could not come in. That appears on page 99. And again, um, then she talks about all the other parts around it, including on page 100. And here's where she talks about and uses the word colonize or has power over something yet again. So at the top of page 100, that door had exploded inward, and only fragments of wood clung to the rusted hinges. A purple flowering vine had colonized the lighthouse wall and curled itself around the remains of the door on its left side. There was comfort in that. Why? For whatever had happened with such violence must have occurred long ago. So instead of talking about the uncanny, she says, well, this happened a long time ago, therefore it doesn't necessarily affect me. Okay, now on page 101, something very important happens. She saw someone carve their initials. RS was here. Who is RS? We're still not sure at this point, right? And so something to think about. And then she starts thinking about all the different things that are here and all the things that might have happened. But most importantly is on page 103. And again, this character plays a formidable role in this novel as well as in the third novel, Acceptance. Okay, so let's find out what we can find out about the lighthouse keeper. So, in the first body paragraph itself here, the first paragraph, it says otherwise. Whoops, sorry, I'm going in the opposite direction. It starts with otherwise. Otherwise, there was the dust and the mold in a tiny square window. Opposite, a faded photograph in a broken frame, dangling from a nail. The smudged glass was cracked, so something must have happened. And there was green mold, so this was a long time ago. The black and white photograph showed two men standing at the base of the lighthouse with the girl off to the side. A circle had been drawn with a marker around one of the men. He looked about 50 years old and wore a fisherman's cap, so we got someone who is clearly um, into fishing and or knows how to fish. A sharp eagle's eye, so someone who was very smart and very much a leader, right? Gleamed out from a heavy face that the left eye lost to his squint, kind of like arr, almost like that. A thick beard hid all but a hint of a firm chin under it. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. I'd have experience enough with lighthouse keepers to know one when I saw one. It made me think of him as the lighthouse keeper. Or perhaps I'd already spent too much time in that place. But I think she's right. So this lighthouse keeper may have been the last one to see what was going on in Area X. And so what is very interesting is how this sort of plays out. How many years between the photograph and the start of it all? Because again, it's a black and white photo. Black and white photos used to be the only way to communicate or show photos for many years. Color did not come in until years later, which indicates that this photo was taken a long, long time ago. Now, why might that be important? Remember, how many expeditions have there been according to the Southern Reach people? There's been 12. And this is why I call The Lies of Area X number 2. This is where um, on page 105 to 106, I'm assuming it's at the bottom. Okay, so at the bottom of page 105, she kind of describes that she sees something that completely freaks her out. She finds a trapdoor at the top of page 106. The trapdoor opened onto a space about 15 feet deep and 30 feet wide. The psychologist had clearly been here, for her knapsack, several weapons, bottles of water, and large flashlight lay off to the left side. But the psychologist herself, there was no sign. So the psychologist was here. Not sure if she's still here, but she could be here. And again, as we find out, she is still there, but not in the same way that we've seen her before. No, what had me gasping for breath, what felt like a punch to the stomach, as I dropped a kind of insane Maiden. I was looking at a pile of papers with hundreds of journals on top of it, like the ones we had been issued to report our observations of Area X. This indicates that she's reached the point where other people in the expedition have left all of their diaries and journals that they're supposed to keep with them, each with the job title written on the front, each, as it turned out, filled with writing. Many, many, many more than could possibly have been filled by only 12 expeditions. Can you really imagine what it was like in those first moments, peering down into that dark space and seeing that? Perhaps you can. Perhaps you're staring at it now. Okay, so this is what we call the lives of Area X, and it's very interesting that at this point she stops herself and then kind of refers to her past. But I'm going to kind of skip over that and talk about that probably in another video. So, starting on page 111, she continues her story about the journals so as not to distract you. I'm trying to keep it in pace for you. So the journals and other materials formed a moldering pile about 12 feet high. And again, each of these journals as a symbol not only of how many expeditions there have been, but how many different kinds of people have been there, right? She's going to find journals from hundreds of expeditions, and she's not going to be able to read them all. But there's one in particular that she finds most fascinating, and it's almost as if it were right there all along, and that is her husband's journal. So you want to take note of that. Her husband's journal is essentially a symbol of the uncanny, something familiar yet unfamiliar. Is it going to be the same person that she knew? Is it going to be her husband that she sees and hears from and reads his ideas? Or is it going to be some other person? Was he completely lying about the kind of person that he was? These questions come into sort of context within this novel. She also finds other things in that spot, but none of them are as important as um, the her husband's journal. And so she's going to take the picture of the lighthouse keeper and her husband's journal with her. And again, these become two important symbols in chapter 5. She purposely decides not to read her husband's journal, and it's very interesting that you have to think about why she chooses not to read the journal at that moment. What would be the result if she reads the journal right there? I bet you she would not do the same things that she ends up doing in chapter 5, although she could have. So it's a very interesting question to ask. And again, I'm going to kind of get through this as fast as I can. And so she talks about all different kinds of stuff, but I don't want to get too far off of it. What I do want to talk about is the fact that the psychologist is here. So, in this next video, I'm going to do one more flashback from chapter 3 and then dive straight into chapter 4. So, chapter 3 is more important for the uncanny, with the uncanny moss and the uncanny dolphins, and then, of course, the past, right? And the lives of Area X. And again, the idea is that She's been betrayed in so many ways, and it freaks her out because it's so unexpected. Okay? So now we're going to talk about chapters 4 and 5. This is where things get crazy. So I hope that you go along with me. And chapter 5 is probably the most fantastic chapter in like the history of writing. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.